Hello everyone, this is Maz. If you're hearing this message, it means you're not part of the Voices of War subscriber community and will only hear the first half of the episode. If that's enough, then I'm thrilled. However, if you're looking to dive deeper into the complexities of war, please consider subscribing to our private feed by using the link at the top of the show notes. By doing so, you'll gain access to all of our episodes, the ability to ask follow-up questions, and will become part of an exclusive community that makes this show possible. I hope you'll make the decision to join us today.
The real victims are the civilians, are the people of Gaza, who are, in a sense, hostages of Hamas. You cannot kill ideas. What the Israelis are trying to do in Gaza is completely absurd. They will strengthen the idea rather than they will give it more strength. They cannot kill Hamas. They will strengthen it. If you consider this from the perspective of the region, the United States is definitely not a reliable partner. To its allies, it's very reliable. To its enemies,
Right.
you can rely on it blundering.
My guest today is Nadim Shehadi, who is a renowned Lebanese economist and thought leader who has enjoyed an extensive career in academia and policy advice. Until recently, he was the executive director of the Lebanese American University's New York headquarters and academic center. He has also held positions as director of the Fairs Center for Eastern Mediterranean Studies at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University, as associate fellow of the Middle East and North Africa program at Chatham House in London, a senior member of St. Anthony's College, Oxford, where he also served as director of the Center for Lebanese Studies from 1986 to 2005. Nadim is also a consultant to several governments and international organizations. He has produced several publications and contributes regularly to media coverage of Middle Eastern affairs, including through a semi-regular opinion column in Arab News. Nadim joins me today for his reflection on the events unfolding in Israel, Gaza and the West Bank, and how these impact Lebanon and the broader region. Nadim, thank you very much for joining me on The Voices of War.
Thank you, Matt.
And now it's an absolute pleasure, and as we were talking offline, I think there are many intersecting interests that we share. Whether it's
forgot to say that I'm now in Beirut. I'm speaking to you from the mountains outside Beirut. So I look out of the window and the balcony to check if there are any planes coming.
Oh my God, that's rather dark humor, but I can understand that. Might I say, the wonderful city of Beirut. I've had the pleasure of spending a couple of wonderful days walking the streets and thoroughly enjoyed it. And I do hope to make the link as we talk, as you alluded to now.
Yes,
preamble.
I've been to Sarajevo too, and I've had. It was a very interesting visit. I met a lot of people from civil society there, and we discussed the differences between the peace agreements that settled our conflicts, the Taif agreement in Lebanon and the Dayton agreement.
Yeah, and I definitely want to come to that. But before we, I guess, dive into the discussion proper, it would be, I think, really useful for our audience to get an understanding of your own background. So firstly, given how much you've done across your career, how do you describe what you do? But also, how did you even get into the space where you are now? What motivated your entry into international relations, economics, etc.?
Well, I studied economics, and I was unhappy with the way economics was being taught with mainstream economics. When at the time I was studying, so I got distracted and got interested in the history of economic thought rather than in economics proper. So I'm more of a historian of ideas and how ideas become accepted and how they become unquestioned. where there are when sets of ideas become unquestionable. I think that's the biggest danger.
As in, they become we become wedded to them. Like, for example, trickle down economics.
Whatever. Where you don't even have to. You don't question anymore the basics, the fundamental assumption, and your. So that's what. So I shifted from. I was doing a PhD in the history of ideas, of how the post World War II economics, which were very statist, where what were the debates that made us reach there, if you like. And by pure accident, I started a job in Oxford, and I stayed there for 20 years instead of just 2 months, and shifted completely to Middle Eastern studies and later at Chatham House again for about 20 years. It was so I'm an imposter, if you like. I'm an imposter on economics. I shouldn't call myself an economist, and I'm an imposter on several fields.
Well, okay, that's not how I would have described it, given your reputation. But I do appreciate the humility. And one thing that I guess struck me is when you were talking about, I guess, the theories or economic theory, economic thinking, and how we can get stuck in our ways. It feels like that resonates quite strongly right now, given what's happening in the Middle East. That
absolutely
many players might be stuck in their paradigm, in their theory, perhaps geopolitical theory or however we want to describe it. So perhaps that's an interesting launching platform for us. How would you summarize, in your view, what is happening in the Middle East right now?
To simplify matters, I think what happened in Gaza recently, last month, exactly a month and 1 day ago, is a standard guerrilla operation, which was succeeded beyond expectation. And the standard guerrilla operation, if you look at textbook guerrilla theory, Mao Zedong and Che Guevara and Ho Chi Minh and whatever, it's basically 3 steps. You infiltrate the population, you hit at the enemy hits back and causes collateral damage with the population, and the population gets angry and outraged, and they support the guerrilla more. So that's basically what, and that's what we're saying. We're saying that and we've seen that pattern happen over the last at least 10-15 years regularly, where Hamas provokes something by Israel, then retaliates, and Israel then reacts and hits at Gaza, and the whole region rises in outrage. And in this case, the whole world is rising in outrage because of the way Israel is bombing Gaza. So
okay,
it is called this strategy of provocation.
Well, it's certainly achieved that. I mean, there's no two ways about it.
So
but
it has, and so going back from that, what's really silly in a way is that we've seen it happen. I mean, there was one episode in last April. There was one in 2021, which was a major one. There was 2014. There was 2009, 2012 also. At different stages, different intensity, always the same pattern.
Do you consider this? I mean, given the outrage you pointed out, global outrage towards what Israel is doing now, in Gaza. Although I do want to ask you whether you think that that is actually global, or are they pockets of support for Israel that we're still, I guess, seeing?
It is, of course, no, of course there is. The world is complete. Actually, it's very interesting because this crisis has brought out the best and the worst in people, and it's brought out the real people, the real person. I'm looking at the declarations of some of the politicians in the US. It's fascinating how some of them, the ones who pretended to be very progressive and all that, how they take a position which is obviously very political. No, there is. It's divided almost every country is divided.
So how do you, from where you're sitting, and as you made the point in Beirut, and I just want to, I guess, place our viewers and listeners in a moment in time that, today is the 8th of November, as you alluded to, and it's just gone after midday in Beirut and in Jerusalem. So, this might come out, barely a few hours later, but just so people know when we're talking. How do you interpret, from where you're sitting, the actions by Israel in Gaza as well as in West Bank?
Yes, I think, Israel has, in a way, no choice but to fall into the trap every time.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised that they haven't found an alternative falling into the trap. So that's from on the Gaza side. The real victims are the civilians, are the people of Gaza, who are, in a sense, hostages of Hamas. They've never been consulted by Hamas about dragging them into a war that's going to destroy them and kill so many people and probably displace many more. And they have no choice. In a way, they are. Hamas controls the area. And Hamas also controls the negotiations with Israel. So Hamas, from time to time, eases matters. Like very recently, in fact, and that's the reason why the Israelis were taken by so much surprise. Very, very recently, there has been an agreement between Israel and Hamas, brokered by the UN and the Qataris and the Egyptians, to allow I think about 18,000 workers to go across to Israel, and services and money, and they've released some money.
In the construction industry, I think in particular, and
construction industry, and for someone in Gaza to go and work in Israel, it's very lucrative.
Of course.
So you're asking me where I am. I'm also a hostage. Because Lebanon itself is a hostage to another militia, which is Hezbollah, because Hezbollah can ignite a war any minute without us in Lebanon having an opinion on it, about it. So that's why I feel this similarity with the people of Gaza.
And I think
there is no dissent in Gaza because they control it with there's dissent is not allowed.
It's ruled by the iron fist, ruthless.
It's ruled by the iron fist and by gravity. They throw people off balconies sometimes. That's the way they took over Gaza, through violence. And in a way, that's the way also that Hezbollah took over Lebanon.
Right. Okay. And I definitely want to get into those parallels because they're important.
So the other side of the equation is that these movements are in a way empowered by Israeli reaction.
Okay.
So they what happens and their main victory is against their local rivals. so Hamas's victory is complete and absolute against the PLO and against the Palestinian National Authority, not against Israel.
Yeah,
It's,
it galvanizes its grip on Gaza.
Its grip, and also it takes credit that it's defending the cause. And Hamas's agenda is that only armed resistance can liberate you, whereas the PLO and the Palestinian Authority are doing negotiations. And here, of course, Israel takes a lot of the credit for empowering Hamas, if you like, or the blame for empowering Hamas, because in several instances, when, say, in 2006, and 2009 and other places, when there were hostages taken by Hamas or by Hezbollah, Israel would do a swap, and they would swap one hostage for hundreds of hostages, or hundreds of prisoners in Israeli jails, whereas the negotiations, which have been going on now for 33 years, haven't released a single prisoner from Israeli jail.
Right.
So you can see that. So of course, Hamas can claim that their
methods,
armed struggle methods produce, and that the enemy only understands armed struggle, and that playing Gandhi doesn't work with the Israelis.
Yeah, one of the things that I really liked in the language that you use is that Hamas has set a trap. And this is something I published a short little piece a few days ago, kind of talking to the same angle about this kind of trap that Israel was left between a rock and a hard place. You know, they're doomed if they do, doomed if they don't, because they had to, I guess, react to what, you know, is gross inhumanity that we saw on October 7th. And because of those hostages, their ability to act was also severely constrained and limited. So therefore they, you know, resorted to bombardments, excessive bombardments in my view, for vengeance. And this is obviously Netanyahu's words, right? It was vengeance. It's to exact, you know, the bloodlust that is understandable given the circumstances. But one of the things that I'm still wrestling with to understand, and this applies both to Hezbollah as well as Hamas, is whilst, as you said, they don't necessarily enjoy a lot of support, perhaps by the locals, but in the Hamas case, they were as democratically elected as they could be, and apparently, from all accounts, he was a very democratic.
Really.
Okay, right? Yes. Sorry, that's the question. Yeah. Please go on.
No, the 2006 elections, where so I was there. I was in Cairo at the time, and I opened the newspaper. There were 11 lists for the PLO, Fatah, and the Independents, which is the secular part.
Right.
And there was only one single Hamas list with its ally.
Right.
So that's the reason for. So the anti-Hamas list, the anti-Hamas vote
was divided, basically.
Divided.
Yeah. It was diluted basically because there were so many options.
Very much diluted. And also it's unfair to say that it was democratic elected after 17 years, because most of the people in Gaza were not born yet or could not vote. So it's your blame in a way, because the election of Hamas is mentioned as a blame rather than you elected them.
It's your fault. Absolutely. And
but it's not, because they and the world has changed a lot since. You know, you have a completely new generation, and generations change.
And their views change, and
against their parents, in a sense, and there is a generational change since that time in the whole region, in a way represented by the Arab Spring. So the Arab Spring is a generational change against the ideas of the previous generations, which were very nationalistic, and where you accepted the rule of dictatorship because of the priorities of the battle and the cause and nationalism. So the Arab Spring represents that.
And in Gaza too? I mean, is
No, in Gaza there is. In Gaza we don't know because there's no expression. But there was a time around 2011 also when you could see a lot of hip hop and YouTube music videos and you can now get them on get these things on online discussions like Clubhouse or Twitter Spaces.
Right.
I mean, I once stumbled. I listened to Twitter Spaces or Clubhouse when I'm going for a walk or when I'm on the treadmill, and I stumbled on a group from Gaza, on the discussion from Gaza, less than a month ago. Less than a month before the war started, and it was very interesting. It was some people were in Gaza itself, and others were in Germany, in Canada. And Belgium.
So the Palestinian diaspora.
And the people who were in Gaza were telling them how good the life was, and that they cross over to Israel, they make $4,000 a month, they live like a king in Gaza with that money, and I do barbecue on the beach with and eat fish on the beach. What do you do in Belgium? How many people do you see? Do you have any friends? You work your ass off.
And that's so interesting.
You can hardly pay the bills. And one of them told him, "Yes, when I came here, I only knew one cousin." And he told him, "How many times have you seen that cousin in the last 2 years?" And so this was the atmosphere just before
that's interesting.
The war started. I'm not trying to say that Gaza was
a paradise,
not a prison. It was a prison, and they are hostages, and they are and they don't have much choice. But people do carve themselves, since you are about voices of war. It's a very interesting theme, by the way, because very few people understand war if they haven't lived through it. People do carve themselves a space during the war where they can ignore it. Especially if it's a long one.
It's their way to retain sanity and connect and to others.
Yes.
And of course Beirut has experienced that, and Sarajevo of course has, and I know certainly
yes, we had the best parties during the war in the basement.
That's my dad says the same thing. I mean, he's been on the front lines for 3.5 years, but he often would reflect and say that those years, despite the fact that his wife and 2 sons were away in Germany as refugees, those are still some of the most vivid memories of a sense of purpose, of collective enduring, of everybody sharing and coming together. I mean, they dug a well because there was no water, 7-meter deep well in winter. They had a communal garden, these kinds of things that of course, besides all the killing and the death, there were moments that he even reflects now on fondly as some of the most, dare I say, I don't want to tarnish it with a wrong brush, but some of the most memorable, is certainly joyous moments of his life, despite the fact that they were in the middle of a war zone or under siege. So that really resonates.
Yeah, and while we're on the subject, another thing about war. I mean, you made me think about these things. I hadn't thought about them before, but another thing about it's almost like there is a state of war. It's like a switch, and when it's over, the switch is switched off. And people go back to normal life, normal relations with those you considered as enemies. and that's why when we get to the differences between our peace process and your peace process in Sarajevo, this is a relevant factor, because in the Dayton Agreement, they froze the situation of conflict as though it's permanent.
Yeah, I mean, maybe let's get to that now, because I mean we're kind of talking about it anyway, and it will allow us to open up the conversation as it relates to what's happening on the ground now. So maybe give us some context, because you have spent some time in Sarajevo doing.
Well, I'll tell you. Yes, I mean, I've spent not enough time in Sarajevo, but it was quite intense, because I went with a group of. With an institution called the Arab Reform Initiative, with a group of Syrian opposition people, and we met. We had 2 days of discussions with people from civil society in Sarajevo, and I was there. I was at Chatham House, and I was there as a Lebanese expert on Lebanon, if you like, and they were friends anyway, so they invited me. And it was to talk about the Taif agreement. And the best way I can explain it is that, you see, we are children of empire, and empires rule over many nations. So in a city like Beirut or Sarajevo, during times of empire, there are many nations who live together in that city. And you have centuries of coexistence and of interaction between families, personal relations, and sometimes relations across communities are better than within communities. People forget that there is also rivalry within communities that are sometimes even more intense than across communities. And the way these cities are constructed is there are quarters. You have the Jewish quarter, the Christian quarter, the Turkish quarter, the Kurds, in your case probably the Serbs.
Yeah, that's right. The Orthodox, the Catholic. That's right. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the interaction happens in the common areas, and at night they can go to their area and be different people.
Yeah.
So you have a dual. You almost have a schizophrenic. You need a certain degree of hypocrisy to
coexist. Yeah.
And you perfect it. You can't teach it to people.
Yeah.
And foreigners never understand it.
And that's context. That's context, and that's nuance.
Yes.
Which is why people don't.
Yeah, it's impossible to explain it to anyone who doesn't experience it. How can you have so much prejudice and so much coexistence and so much love sometimes in the same context?
And how overnight it can shift. So it can literally shift overnight.
Overnight it can shift to very brutal. Freud calls it the narcissism of small differences. And I think he uses Serbs and Croats as an example.
Yeah.
That they even have the same mustache. But it's very intense. Intense conflict between them. So yes, it does switch off. So the difference between our agreement and the Dayton Agreement is that the Dayton Agreement takes the situation of conflict and freezes.
It's a ceasefire. It's not a peace agreement. It's a ceasefire.
It's a ceasefire, but it freezes the separation. And when we were in Sarajevo, the people there, the activists, said that it's not us. What the result is not us. We do not have the prerogative to do joint cross-communal political programs and projects and all that, because the Dayton Agreement freezes the separation between us. So it becomes more internal politics.
Right.
And whereas in Lebanon, we switched off, literally, forgot that there was ever a war, produced an amnesty to all that happened before that war, and continued as though nothing happened, with a small fine-tuning on the power sharing arrangement.
Right. Just again, many of our listeners or viewers might not have sufficient understanding of the Lebanese civil war, so
Well,
perhaps not even the Bosnian
yes.
one. So can you just give us the wave tops? Because it was quite a long war. It's not a, we're not talking a couple of years. We're talking, I think it was
No, we're
15
talking about
years.
15,
Yeah.
yes, yes. But in fact, and if you want to get into the zoom into the details, it was not a civil war all the time, because it was a I mean, some Lebanese also deny that it was ever a civil war.
Yeah.
In a sense, but it was.
It's the same in Bosnia.
It was different visions, different views, and in a nutshell, a lot of the war was internal within each community because of the Syrian takeover of the country. So there was a lot of there were Syrian factions, even amongst the Palestinians. There were pro-PLO factions and pro-Syrian factions.
This is in Lebanon as well, right? So these are the Palestinian refugees, right?
Yes. So well, it's not just Palestinian refugees. The PLO,
of course,
set up a state. It was a state within a state. In Lebanon, and it was the capital of global revolutionaries, because you had Carlos the Jackal and the Badr Meinhof and the Italian Red Army and the Red Brigade and the Sandinistas and Iranian exiles, and so this was very intense place intellectually during the Civil War. I've met some of the people who were, I've spoken to some of the people who were here about the interactions between the different revolutionaries, and how there was a rift between the Northerners, the Germans and the Italians and the British and the Irish and the Southerners, along the lines of tiers-mondisme. They lived it. We read it in
books and
textbooks, but they lived. They actually lived it. And the Iranian Revolution, in a sense, I mean, we're digressing, but the Iranian Revolution took a lot from here, because a lot of the exiles were in Lebanon.
And why was Lebanon such a breeding ground, I guess, for what was it about Lebanon?
Okay.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to digress too much, because I think all of this matters as we link it.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
It's all relevant. So if I wanted to explain Lebanon in one sentence, I would say that Lebanon is a country that skipped the 20th century. The 20th century is about creating homogeneous, nationalist, strong states which are sovereign and
decolonized, etc. Yeah,
where you and where you have one language, one religion, one culture, one identity. Atatürk, the Turkish laïcité model. Which is
the Turkish Republic.
Which is easy to achieve. Which is easy to achieve, and some people idealize it, but you have to massacre the Armenians first and kick out the Greeks and suppress the Kurds. And brainwash 2 or 3 generations with the dictatorship that imposes on you a new language, forgets 500 years of history. So we didn't do that. It's all the countries in the region did that. We absorbed the cosmopolitan Levantine spirit of the region in one place. So Beirut inherited that culture of the cosmopolitan culture, a non-nationalist, and as a result, it attracted most of the intellectuals and business people and merchant families from the region. So think of a place like Alexandria, which was a cosmopolitan city in Ottoman times, comes Nasser and defines Arab identity as a rigid thing, which in a way excludes the Greeks of Alexandria, who have probably been there in a continuous presence since the days of Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
So suddenly they become alien.
Yeah.
Because it's a nationalist.
It's a shift.
And so they come to Lebanon. Some of them go to Greece, and they can't live in Greece because it's a homogeneous place.
Yeah.
You sometimes need people to look down on.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, but that's a psychological factor, right, of us and them, right? That's a really amongst people, among social groups.
If you're used to a cosmopolitan existence and a multicultural existence, it's very difficult to
go to a homogeneous one.
To live in a very boring, homogeneous place where people are clones of each other. And
that makes absolute sense.
So we attracted people a lot of people from southern Turkey, from Egypt, of course, from Palestine. The elite of Palestine came to Lebanon. The bankers and the contractors, and so if from Syria, from Iraq, from the whole region. So Beirut was a vibrant place in terms of art and music and culture and cafes. And,
I mean, you're describing Sarajevo. I mean, it's I find the parallels just incredible.
Very different from the rigid nationalism. Well, we had corruption in the good sense of the word.
Yeah.
Rather because,
things were getting done.
And in Orwell's 1984, corruption is freedom in a sense, because an authoritarian regime puts down the rules and imposes the language and the ideas, and any departure from that is corruption. So we were corrupt to the core.
Right.
Because we had no... Yes. I mean, the best example is that I'm sure there is the same in Sarajevo, in Bosnia, that the Lebanese have attribute the collapse of the state to the lack of nationalism. And they say, we don't have a common history. Each one has a different story. What is this? You need to create a homogeneous textbook which unifies the history so that all the students in universities and in schools learn the same history. And that would prevent conflict. That's very common discussion in Lebanon. And I once in Oxford, we had a conference on Lebanese history, and they were discussing this, and there was a Turkish historian there from Brown University from the States, who explained that he was sacked from his job. He lost his job. He was almost put in jail, and he was persecuted because he dared teach critically the common history book. So if you define a history as a unifying factor and to maintain civil peace and security, then if you dare question it, you're first of all, you're corrupt. And second of all, you are creating division, and it's an attempt on national security and cohesiveness of the nation. You see, so we were not like that, and it's that kind of freedom in Lebanon, with a very weak state institutions. We only had an army for parade. Very nice uniforms, because around us there was a deliberate anti-military
feeling and vibe, culture.
Feeling for two reasons. One of them is that the military were really native, in the sense that they were the real Lebanese, the military, whereas the elite was cosmopolitan. The elite was from different areas. So there was a cultural difference between that, and there was a precedent of the military taking over in the whole region. Actually, at the time, it was a global fashion. From Latin America to Pakistan, you had people in military uniform taking over. And juntas. So the way to avoid this is
to create a clear separation.
And keep it very small. And weak, the state. But the other side of this is that kind of freedom also allows for the PLO to come and set up shop. Especially that the half the population were in sympathy with the PLO.
Because
part of that division.
And how does then Hezbollah come into the picture? Because Hezbollah is a political movement as well as a military faction.
Absolutely.
So how does that come into the picture?
Okay. Now this is also a fascinating story, because when you live in a multicultural space, each group have their different regional affiliation and their different historical references. And the Shia of Lebanon.
No, that's fine. No problem.
This is I switched
no
it
problem.
off.
No problem at all.
So the Shia of Lebanon are part of experienced the same Shiite revival, the phenomenon of Shiite revival from the 50s and 60s that happened in Iran and in Iraq and after the Mossadegh revolution. So this is not shutting off.
You're a wanted man.
I thought I had switched. The main division is that in Shiite Islam, there is a culture of suffering, and you're supposed to suffer quietly until it's called quietism, until the hidden imam comes back. It's sort of messianic. So the hidden imam will come back and establish justice. On earth. Now, this means that if you are a quietist, a 12er, you have to wait for the hidden imam to come. You have to wait for the return to establish justice. It also means that it's futile to try and establish justice before the hidden imam comes. And if you try and participate in politics, it means that your faith in the hidden imam's return is a bit shaky.
Right.
So the clergy were the mainstream of the clergy were quietists in Iran at the time, and in Najaf in Iraq, where
the main center is, and of course the annual pilgrimage to Najaf.
But young people were, imagine yourself in the 50s with the rise of nationalism, with all these ideas floating, and your clergy is telling you that you should just pray and not participate in politics, and all these revolutions happening
and to stand by and watch.
So there was a movement in which was across the board, which was a kind of rebellion against quietism, which was represented by, which is called the Shiite revival, political revival, where they started participating in politics, and many of them were kicked out of Iran and spread all over the world. Many went to Paris, to Egypt, to Iraq, to Syria,
to
Lebanon. And then eventually, when it wasn't so healthy to be in Syria or in Iraq under Saddam, or places like, or in Egypt, where you were being also there was not enough freedom. They all conglomerated to Lebanon, where one of their classmates, one of their movement, was appointed as the head of the Shiite council in Lebanon, Imam Musa Sadr. So Imam Sadr is a key figure in this. It's a family that originates from Lebanon that emigrated to Iran to spread the Shiite faith in Safavid times.
Right.
So this is there are the relations,
the dense links. Yeah.
very dense links, and this is what happens in a multicultural environment. They have links, we don't. This is their links. This is not our links. And they're experiencing a revival we're not, or we're experiencing a different revival, which is more connected to if you're a Christian, to secular movements within the Christian world, or to nationalist movements in the region, and so when you're in an environment where you respect multiculturalism, you give it freedom of expression, and you don't clash with it, because if they believe in the imam, let them believe in their imam. And
if it's coexistence, right, without violence, if it's coexistence, then it's
exactly. So this brings even a worse thing, which is compromise. So when the PLO was kicked out of Jordan, they were kicked out of Egypt, kicked out of Jordan, kicked out of Syria, and they ended up in Beirut with the support of at least half the population. You compromise. You don't put the supporters of the PLO in jail, because they especially the Sunni population, were taken by the nationalist revival of Nasser. It was not exclusively Sunni. It's not that clear-cut sectarian, but you in a way accept, even if you don't accept the idea, you accept that they believe that, and you make a compromise. On it. So that's how the PLO became
embedded,
so central, and that's embedded. And the Shiite movements in Lebanon were very close to Iran. I mean, the Amal movement was created by Mustafa Shamran, who was an exile from Iran in Lebanon, and who went back to Iran and became the first defense minister under Khomeini.
Right.
So that's how close.
Right.
And the military training that these people got was with the PLO in Lebanon.
Right.
And the ideological training was with that toxic mixture of revolutionaries.
Right.
Which included liberation theology from the Latin Americans. So you have Marxists becoming Islamists. I mean, there is even one example in Lebanon of a Palestinian Christian who was a Marxist who founded an Islamist party in Tripoli.
Right.
I think he's still alive.
Right.
I have his memoir. So that kind of a travesty, which you can't even invent in fiction, existed in. And in Lebanon, we in a way we like the freedom, we enjoy the freedom, and when it gets out of control, we accept the authoritarianism of either the army or Syrian presence. But then when that gets too much, we reject it again.
Right.
So you have like a pendulum. Swinging from complete anarchy and chaos, which we love, to insecurity, which makes us accept, for example, in 1958, after the first clash over Nasserism, we accepted an army general as a president.
Right.
Yeah, which was fashionable. I mean, it was in tune with global fashion at the time.
But it sounds like a really interesting place.
But now
the balance, and it strikes me as a place
the
that's
imbalance.
well, I guess exactly
the constant,
in a world of order,
repair.
chaos rules, right? And that's what that seems like, right? Because there is an order, a deeply intertwined cultural, nuanced order that exists that allowed the place to be, dare I say, the hippie of the Middle East, in the sense that it was so liberated, both in its intellectual capacity and freedom, but also on the other side in this kind of rebellion slash resistance to authoritarianism, which is why the link you made to the revolutionaries I found really interesting, and I never knew that it was Baramanov,
and prosperity and prosperity. I mean, you have the Levantine merchants and bankers who came from Aleppo,
right,
or from Mosul, were part of the trade route to India, and the ones that came from Alexandria and Cairo were people who had taken part in very sophisticated global financial transactions during the building of the Suez Canal, during the Khedival, the debts of the ruler for the Sudan campaign, for example. So they would trade international bonds, and whereas in Beirut at the same time they were just small trading houses that dealt with the silk production and some agricultural. It wasn't so. What the immigrants brought with them,
it expanded,
was far more sophisticated than what we.
So why is Lebanon experiencing such economic strife over the more recent past, given its kind of eclectic, colorful history, design, openness, etc.? Why is Lebanon where it is at the moment? And perhaps you can even give us a quick summary as to where Lebanon is at the moment economically.
Well, Lebanon is now in complete paralysis. We have no president, no government, no parliament, no central bank governor. Very soon we will have no army chief. So it's a complete collapse of the whole state institutions through paralysis. And the paralysis is created mainly by Hezbollah, in the same way as maybe Hamas took over Gaza, Hezbollah took over here, but a different context. But since 2005, it's been assassinations, triggering wars. So I wrote a piece comparing what's happened in Gaza now with the 2006
I'll
war
link that to this.
That was triggered by
really
Hezbollah. Hezbollah in 2006 was in a corner, in a sense, because we were telling Hezbollah, I mean, the conversation, if you like, was that's it. There's no more need for a resistance. The Israelis withdrew in 2000. We give you credit, you liberated, and we accept all this. You never contradict the national narrative of your partner. And the Syrians withdrew also. So let's turn the page and rebuild the country. And by triggering the war, they reestablished their
political credentials.
Their presence.
Yeah.
Political presence. Because if I was speaking to a Hezbollah person and telling him, listen, the UN has issued 7 Security Council resolutions for Lebanese sovereignty and security in the last 6 months, and the United States and Europe and the EU and France and the Arab League are all in support of Lebanon, and the Syrians have been forced to withdraw. Let's build a new country. We don't need the arms anymore. By provoking the war, he tells, just 1 week after the war, he would tell you, okay, Israel is still a threat. The United States supported Israel. The EU supported Israel. And the UN is powerless. and the Arab League is powerless. So it managed to regain the legitimacy of the arms and gradually took over the country through paralysis, through assassinations, through maintaining a constant state of war.
Because I guess in 2006, and just to kind of zero in on that a little bit, it can be said that Hezbollah technically won against Israel as much as Israel overwhelmed. But
well, in this, Hezbollah won against Israel in the same way as Hamas has won.
It caused a reaction that then forced Israel to overreact. Yeah, that's right.
So, whatever happens, Hamas will declare victory. But the people who paid the price are the civilians in Gaza.
Yeah.
We paid the price in that the country was destroyed. But Hezbollah declares victory.
Yeah. Can I just on the link between the two? I mean, and again, something that's kind of already come out, but as you mentioned, Hezbollah has got deep Shiite roots, far deeper than I realized, and the density between Hezbollah and Iran is far denser than I realized. But then, of course, Hamas is Sunni, which
Hamas is Sunni and deeply ingrained in the
Muslim
Brotherhood,
right? So
which
competing tracks,
competing tracks.
Okay, so maybe rationalize that for us, because that's perhaps something that's
very easy.
Yeah, okay.
It's very easy. In 1992, Israel rounded up all the senior Hamas leaders, 400 of them, and kicked them out of the country, exiled them across the Lebanese border. So they established camp in South Lebanon for a whole year.
Right.
And that's where they bonded with Hezbollah.
That's the revolutionary brotherhood, right?
That's the brotherhood.
Right, yes. right. And common enemy.
Otherwise, but I mean, now there are two factions in Gaza. One of them is the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is part of Khomeini's export of the revolution.
And again, Shia, right? If I understand that correctly.
No, they are. They're not Shia. They're Sunni. Okay. Sunnis who drank the Kool-Aid of
Khomeini.
Khomeini.
Okay,
yes.
Right.
And there was always tensions with Hamas on that, and there was a serious rift between Hamas and Hezbollah and Hamas and Iran during the Syrian revolution, because the Muslim Brotherhood element in Syria was anti-Assad and Hezbollah was helping Assad. And the Hamas was helping the Muslim Brotherhood with digging. They taught them how to dig tunnels, and they taught them tactics and gave them technology that they had learned from the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. And at the time, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard elements thought that Hamas was treason, that they were communicating the technology that they had taught them to fight them. So there was a lot of tension, but then this was sorted out because they needed the money and they needed the support. So all this talk that Iran had nothing to do with it, and the attack had nothing to do with Iran, and this is purely a Palestinian resistance matter. It's I don't know what's the acceptable word for bullshit in podcasts.
You nailed it.
Yes.
Right, well that's interesting. I mean, because that is a narrative that's dare I say taken hold, especially since Hassan Nasrallah's speech last Friday, which was very much awaited by the world to gauge where Hezbollah sits.
Very, very, very clever PR.
Right. Okay, that's interesting because, and I think maybe if you don't mind, it might be worthwhile delving into that because he was, some might say, fairly explicit in saying that this was a Palestinian thing and that Hezbollah stands ready to go, but Hezbollah doesn't want to, in not so many words, or in far more words. But also, many analysts have drawn links to 2006, where he also came out and said that had he known what was going to happen, i.e., had he anticipated the wrath that Israel was going to exact on the civilians of Lebanon, he would have made another decision. And
that's a similar adjective to. I mean,
right.
That's also
right. Okay.
Yes.
So again, this is the PR
because
stunt.
I mean, if you cross the border and you kill 8 soldiers and you kidnap 2, and when you go back you start throwing katyushas at Israel, what do you expect Israel to do? I mean, it was a deliberate provocation of war, and they succeeded in it. And this was the objective, and the objective was to cause as much civilian casualties as possible, to gain the sympathy of the Arab world. Nasrallah became the hero in the Gulf, in North Africa,
right.
at Columbia University.
Okay. So what does Hezbollah want out of this right now? I mean, given what's happening, and that one of the big fears is, and why many are saying that the US has bolstered its presence in the region, is that there is a risk of serious escalation, and Hezbollah is, I guess, trying to play the game. We've seen an increase in missiles being launched, and between Israel and Hezbollah, but many are sort of saying, well, it's within the kind of accepted, normalized state of war.
That's what you say when you don't. But each side can escalate at any moment by saying that this was like one.
Too far. Too many died, because soldiers are dying, certainly on the Israeli side, but of course civilian and Hezbollah fighters. I think in the 60s,
Hezbollah fighters were quite a lot of Hezbollah fighters. If you accept that in 2006 the number was below 200, 60 is now 1/3 of 2006. It's quite a lot, but also, I mean, there were also hundreds, or the figure is, accepted figure is about 3,000 Hezbollah fighters who died in Syria.
Right. Okay.
If you'd like to hear the rest of this episode and gain access to all of the episodes of The Voices of War, simply become a subscriber using the link in the show notes. As you know, I will not feature any ads on the show, which is made possible solely through the support of our subscribers. If you find value in the content, you can become one now.